Most recently I was asked, what are the Ascended Masters? In popular tale and in modern literature, an Ascended Master is a term used by the Theosophical tradition and most basically means a human that has crossed into what they refer to as the sixth dimension or beyond. But apart from this, I think that some can agree to the fact that an Ascended Master has come to symbolize to some any number of entities that appear human in shape or disposition, as it were, but that have nevertheless transcended this dimension, and now occupy themselves in a number of monumental actions in conjunction with others of its kind, a kind of secret fraternity, and the nature of these actions are all dependent on what literature or doctrine you may have read or believe in. Generally speaking, an Ascended Master, in reference to this video, parts 1 and 2, will be described as a sometimes previously human entity that having crossed into a dimensional range beyond the three-dimensional one that we occupy as human beings, now seems, in accordance to most dogma, to dedicate itself in what some might call helping humanity, while others might call hindering or controlling the human race. With that in mind then, in this two-part video series, when I refer to Ascended Masters, I'm not just referring to the theosophical definition of what these beings are, but I'm using a broad perspective to include beings such as the Illuminati, for example, that some might believe to only be a flesh and blood human cabal, while others might understand or know that this cabal is not only made up of the flesh and blood members, but that it is also made up of beings that seem to have ascended beyond the physical. As such, some might question this definition, wishing to stick to perhaps the best known definition, which is the theosophical one. But in describing the nature of this body of entities, this force in the world, I will also suggest that the Ascended Masters could quite easily be called the Illuminated Ones, or any number of other terms that are used for beings that have ascended in power, and have become either masters in charge of secret knowledge, or hidden agents that are continually and actively trying to steer the course of human history and evolution, which at times may seem to not have humanity's best interest in mind. As you may imagine then, this is a very difficult group of entities to define. But this is not so much because it is such a difficult thing to see, to perceive them directly honestly, using the techniques that I will describe, but because there is so much diverging dogma around the subject, and it therefore becomes hard to explain the nature of this without stepping on someone's toes, or without losing someone in the translation, as it were. And this again has to do with a great variety of beliefs, canon and convention, around the subject. So, in responding to this question, as to what the Ascended Masters are, my definition then will make use of a more general interpretation of what Ascended Masters may be defined as being, to include such things as the secret chiefs and the Illuminati, which can for many represent those that are symbolized by the masters behind the eye in the pyramid, and all those types of powers and entities that through secret brotherhoods and cabals, even though they may somehow be beyond this dimension, can seem to by hook and crook be able to control the affairs of humanity, the evolution of humanity. I do apologize then if I am going against your personal beliefs or definition, and I only ask for some patience in that the point of these videos is not to just provide my version of the supposed truth of reality, but to give you other alternatives to dogmatic truth that may be more satisfying to you in the long run. Now, with the above point in mind about the endless variety of credo, doctrine, and tenets surrounding this subject, and the negative effects of this oftentimes contradictory study and speculation, I have made a number of videos on the concept of dogma, and how, from my perspective as an inner alchemist, this affluence of dogma is not a helpful thing generally speaking, especially when trying to perceive and understand those things that now are present at the edge of human understanding and policy, that is, those things at the fringe of accepted norm, things that are most usually part of what I have termed the occult experience. In this case, for example, the Ascended Masters are for many a myth, a folklore, a story told by some about a group of super-intelligent individuals that control the world. Some people may feel that this is just a story, and fight against any that believe otherwise. Others may believe what only certain groups might have to say, such as the Theosophical Society, while others may believe only what other groups such as the Golden Dawn might have to say, and opposing factions of believers may fight, one against the other in order to control the narrative around these masters. and in order to be the loudest voice in disseminating the supposed true gospel of the ascended ones, the secret chiefs, or the illuminated ones. But whatever the case, the way of dogma usually means that the average person will most often only trust the doctrine or gospel of one group to a greater or lesser degree, and completely deny others to a lesser or greater degree, and whether they like it or not, usually become the participants in a dogma battle, to protect the integrity of what they and others with similar notions to them believe. Within the bounds of this endless dogma, war among human society, some people may even believe that they themselves are authority figures on the ascended master phenomenon, that due to their own deep personal study on the matter, and their perhaps years of dedication to this subject, they know what is what, and that they now have the right to be dogma creators, dogma expanders, on this subject or any other subject in which they may consider themselves experts. The thing is though that generally, not always to be sure, but the vast majority of this denial, or acceptance, and knowledge about anything including the ascended masters, is all knowledge and information that comes from the study of previous dogma. It comes from someone studying the dogma that someone else is saying or has said, who in turn has studied the words, the dogma, of another person or group. And none of it, not a single thing in most occasions, comes from direct perception and insight. None of it is something that those that believe, or don't believe have witnessed themselves, perceived themselves, in any way. It is all second-hand information. If I, for example, were to tell you what I think or have perceived to be the ascended masters, and you believe me almost without question, then I must indeed thank you, because you must consider me to be someone in authority, and someone you trust to disseminate dogma on this subject. But unless you can perceive this phenomenon, these ascended masters yourself, with the help of some of the words that I have expounded perhaps, then all that I have said is, and will continue to be, dogma. And knowing through dogma is not really knowing. It is just regurgitating the thoughts and words of others, which in accordance to inner alchemy is not really knowing a thing at all. This might all sound a bit arcane and disappointing to some thus far perhaps. I am basically saying that I cannot, or should not, tell you what the ascended masters are, because that would just be adding more dogma to the dogma pile, which can be a bit disappointing given the title of this two-part video series. But all is not lost for those looking for a quick answer, because in this video series I will strive to do 3 things given the time limit, and the limitations imposed by this form of media. The first, which I hope I have already tackled, is to point out a little of the dangers of dogma, of canonized doctrine. How this dogmatic view of reality can be a great hindrance to true knowledge, both in describing those things that are far more complex than is currently believed, and in fundamental and true understanding of a thing, which can only happen, by the way, in accordance to the beliefs of inner alchemists, through direct perception, and not through words, studies, or groupthink. The second is to give you a snippet of what I have perceived about the ascended masters, but there is a catch, as I will explain shortly. This I believe is fair in accordance to the title of this two-part video series. But it is my greatest hope, indeed the catch that I mentioned, that you only use this snippet of information to whet your appetite as to what is possible, what is perceivable by you if you are willing to try, so that you are greatly motivated to use the techniques I will also mention, which is the third thing that I wish to accomplish in this video couplet, and that you use these techniques then to find your own truth, your own direct energetic perception and knowing, which is knowing, beyond all dogma. Now you may ask, is not the teaching of technique just dogma? Well, yes it is. But unlike the spoken or written word, just describing a group of secret chiefs for example, that you may never be able to truly see or know directly yourself, techniques can be practiced instantly, directly, and the truth and usefulness of this discussed technique can be discovered by you personally through action. So listen to my technique dogma then, this is my hope, and prove me right or wrong through your direct action, your success or failure in using this technique dogma that I expound. So my dogma then comes with a challenge, to prove me right or wrong through your own action. So first a small tidbit, as to what I have perceived about the ascended masters, and secondly a description, fitting the time constraints of video format, of the techniques that I use to perceive directly. And being that I do not have much space in these videos, I will separate this video segment into 2 parts, and provide links to free articles and other more advanced resources that you can use to greatly expand your skill, so that you can perceive as I have been able to perceive in time, through your own inner action, and not know a thing just through dogma. Please check out part 2 of this video series, which you will find in the video description below, to listen to my description of the Ascended Masters, and also to get a description of the techniques that I use to know what I know directly. If you are interested in learning more about the power of dogma, and of what I refer to as the memetic war, then I recommend my book, Overcoming the Archon Through Alchemy. I will also leave a link to this Kindle book in the video description below.